Where we are right now, we are on Caroline Street, across the street from where we are on the side of the street of the St. Thomas Episcopal Church. Across the street, you will see the James Madison Inn. And it was a very popular place back during the 1960s. Prior to the bypass being put in the Route 15, all traffic came through Main Street up to the Exxon station on the corner of Main and Caroline. When you make the left, you would see the James Madison Museum. A very busy place back during that time, a hotel, people coming to spend the night, and a lot of the people that lived on Church Street, Mill Street, and in that area worked for the James Madison Inn, including my dad. Inside the James Madison Inn, they also leased the area to the Montpelier Club. Montpelier Club was a club of a lot of exclusive Orange County citizens, and they had a bar, they had a room where they could socialize, dining room, swimming pool. So it was an exclusive place, and my dad, he worked there for many years as the bartender. As a matter of fact, to this day, he had the bar that he tended in his basement of his house. Okay, and I guess in the when they put the bypass through, it sort of hurt the business, and the hotel went out of business, and also the Montpelier Club disbanded. Okay, we're on the at the corner of Caroline Street and West Church Street right now, in the front of what used to be called Halley's One Stop, which is now painted orange. And what I can remember about this place back during the 1960s, there was a man by the name of Mr. Halley, and he operated a small restaurant. He also had gas pumps outside and a small diner inside. I knew the gentleman, an African American that worked for him for many years, Mr. Benny Williams. But what was significant about this place in this neighborhood, African American neighborhood, was that during Jim Crow, African Americans were not allowed to go into this place to eat. Later on, he allowed them to come in to order for takeout, but it was late, up almost until the 1970s, before an African American could go into that restaurant and eat a meal. Well, where we are now, standing at West Church Street, Caroline Street. This opening for this street, prior to them putting the bypass, this is where you entered Church Street, just at the corner of Halley's One Stop. And there was another gas station across the street, which I can't recall the name of. But this is where you used to go into the main Church Street. Right now we are standing on Church Street, and just across from where I'm standing is Robinson Street. Robinson Street was once called Tin Cup Alley, and on Tin Cup Alley, that was the home of many of the African American families in the town of Orange during that period up until about the early 1970s. And I'm standing in front of a marker for Captain Andrew Maples Jr., a Tuskegee Airman that was lost at war in Italy. He was a member of the Tuskegee Airmen, and this is also the location of the Maples home when they lived in the town of Orange. All right, we're standing right now on the Route 15 bypass, and we are near what used to be called the Leggett's parking lot. And this is a significant place because this was a sort of a high volume place on Saturdays. Orange on Main Street was a very busy place, and they had a lot of retail stores, and this area was where everyone parked. And of course a lot of socializing went on here. Behind me, the Route 15 bypass, it was not here at the time, and in order to reach this parking lot, you had to go onto Main Street and turn off between these buildings. That's how you would enter. And where I'm standing near the bypass, everything on to the left of the, or let's say pointing towards Church Street was residential areas. Okay, and none of this bypass was here. These were homes along this bypass until the early 1970s. Okay, right now I'm standing in front of Emmanuel Baptist Church, and this church was built in 1913. A lot of the members from this church were originally members of the Nazareth Baptist Church, which is down the street on Church Street. And about 1910, 38 members of the Nazareth Baptist Church were given letters of dismissal, and they formed the Emmanuel Baptist Church. And it took them a few years to build this church. What was interesting about it is the fact that once they split into two different churches, they had service on Sundays at different times. One in the morning, one in the afternoon, and it ended up that members from both of the church, they each visited each other's church each Sunday. So actually the citizens visited two different churches on Sunday mornings. Okay, we're on Church Street, and we're standing now in front of what used to be the Orange Creamery. There were two buildings, the larger building and the smaller. These structures were built in about 1909, 1910, and they were built by an African American family called the Jacksons. And I do remember in my childhood when it was operating, and they used to deliver milk throughout the town of Orange. And as a matter of fact, one of the wares was one of the delivery people, and that's when I first learned of the Ware family during that period of time. And in later years, the smaller building became Walker's Barber Shop, and the larger building became Satchel Funeral Home. The Satchel Funeral Home is still active business in the town today. We are now at the front of the Nazareth Baptist Church on Church Street in Orange. This church was first started in 1861 on a plantation where the slave master, he gave the congregation permission to have services on that plantation. And after slavery, they moved into the town of Orange, and they built the church on a place donated, and the place was called Sandy Bottom, just exactly where Sandy Bottom is. I'm really not exactly sure, but in 1872, they were sold land at this location and built this church, completed in in 1874. Okay. I'm standing in front of the what was called the livery stable. It's one of the older buildings and first businesses in the town of Orange. This is where people used to travel into Orange with their horses, and this is where they would leave their horses while they would do their business. And over time, of course, it became other businesses. I can remember Harwell Construction Company, and they were a construction company that they dealt with big jobs like building dams and highways, but not too much activity, but it was a significant building in Orange during that time, and a pretty good sized business that employed a lot of people. All right, right now I'm at what was during my childhood the Purina Feed Company, and it was very significant back during my childhood because pretty much all of the African American families in the communities in Orange, they had livestock, and it was important to have a place to go to buy feed for your chickens, your pigs, and also a lot of people had gardens at their homes, and this is where you could come to buy your seeds and your plants and that type of thing. And what I remember coming to this place a lot because my next door neighbor worked here, Mr. Oliver Kelly, and he used to travel from this Purina to the one in Culpeper. We lived in between, and he would stop on the way driving a Purina truck. So I do have a lot of memories of this place. All right, we're now on Chapman Street, just past the ODA office, and where you turn off of Madison Road. And here in this area was what was one time the Wall Street of Orange. They had car dealerships in this area. Of course, the Orange Review was in this area in one of these buildings. I think I'm standing in front of paint shop, shoe shop, and barber shop, and a lot of other little small businesses. So this was a very active street during the 1960s and 1970s. We are now located at the corner of Chapman and Church Street. We are at the location of the future commemorative park that is being built by the Orange County African American Historical Society. This little spot is an important area in the history of African Americans because this was like a social place where people would meet and congregate. It was an area where people used to stop and talk and socialize while on their way to the Railroad Avenue, which had the restaurants, pool room, and other businesses that were owned by the African Americans. We are now at the corner of Church and Mill Streets. The building behind me is what was once called the Lipscomb Building. It was a merchandise store. Later on, it became a very important business for the African American community. There was a barber shop run by Mr. Sneed. There was also a ladies' beauty shop. And there was also a restaurant during that period of time. This is where everyone would come to Orange on Saturdays to get their haircuts, catch up on all the latest news, and to do their socializing. Men would come to get their haircuts, women would be in the beauty shop, Sometimes the women would be shopping, the men would come to get their haircuts and the shave, and then meet back up with their wives and so forth. But very important place, and a lot of memories for this African American community. And behind the Lipscomb building is a residential neighborhood that houses a lot of the African Americans that live in this area. You can see the homes go back, and at the end of the street was a mill at one time, and that's where it got its name, Mill Street. But prior to Mill Street, it was an extension of Railroad Avenue, which is across the street from where we're standing right now. I'm standing on Railroad Avenue right now, and if you look behind me, some of the buildings are missing now, but there were African American owned businesses back during my time, my earlier days. There was a restaurant, there was a pool room, and also a small grocery store over in this area. And on top of the stores, people actually lived, the residential areas. And this went on up until the late 1960s, and that's when all of the businesses started to disappear. All right, we're now standing in front of some more of the African American owned businesses that operated during the 1950s and 60s. And we're standing at the end of the African American section, and this alleyway that goes back between these buildings, that was like a separation point between the African American and the white communities. And you really wasn't allowed to patronize any of the stores on past this alleyway. So everything from this alleyway back to Church Street was African American owned businesses. I'm standing directly across from the train depot. There's a railroad track between, and the building that I'm standing in front of were a few of the white-owned businesses on Railroad Avenue, and one building that was significant that I can remember was the pool room. And the pool room, there was one in front of me, and there was another one down the street. This was the white pool room, and the other down farther on Railroad Avenue was the black pool room. And we as blacks were not allowed to go into that white pool room until late in the 1970s. You know, I just wanted to take this stroll through Church Street, Mill Street, Chapman Street, Railroad Avenue, just to recall some of the memories that I had growing up near the town of Orange, coming into Orange with my parents, and as they do their shopping and so forth, and socializing with the people in the town of Orange. The people were very special people because they more or less had a connection to most of these little African American villages throughout the county of Virginia. And a lot of these people still have a lot of vivid memories of the connections between the people of Orange. And with this park this commemorative park, the Orange African American Historical Society is constructing, will be a commemorative park that will be dedicated to this neighborhood community and those families that live in the town of Orange in this area. And so I would invite you all, June 19th, we will be dedicating this commemorative park. Please come out and join us and learn more about this great town of Orange. Thank you.